This is Delano Lewis. I was just thinking the other day, there's been a lot of the news about the Department of Justice and also affirmative action. That was the buzzword back in my day. Now it's called diversity and inclusion. And it got me to thinking about my days at the Justice Department and also the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So I wanted to share some thoughts with you because I think it's very relevant to what's happening today. I got to Justice Department in 1963 on my birthday, November 12th. And I was there because I was recommended by a close friend of the Kennedy family. So I was very impacted by November 22nd, 1963, like so many people around our country and around the world, because that was the day that JFK was assassinated. But so I started Justice only 10 days from that particular date. But Bobby Kennedy was the Attorney General at that time. And he was in charge of the Justice Department. And President Kennedy also had some criticisms about putting his brother in as Attorney General. All the things about nepotism started even in those days. But I started at Justice in the Internal Security Division. And in that division, we were focusing on communists and spies. I spent 1 year figuring out how to do my job, and I spent another year trying to figure out how to get out. And during this time, as I was learning the business of internal security, the Civil Rights Bill of 1964 was passed on July 3rd. I think it was July 2nd, 1964. And in that bill, it was Title VII, was the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And it was a commission to deal with employment discrimination. Now, many people may not know that it was delayed a year from the passage of the bill and was not to go into effect until July 1965. And that was because of Senator Everett Dirksen of Illinois. And Senator Dirksen, and that was known as the Dirksen Amendment, that passed the U.S. Senate, and it said, let's give our country and our businesses a year to get ready for equal employment. And you and I know we've been spending over 20 years to get ready for equal employment. But that was delayed a year. Title VII, creating the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, didn't go into effect until a year later. But why is that relevant? Because as I was trying to figure out how to get out of Justice Department, and I know many of you may be figuring out if you're stuck, how can I move from one job to the next? And this story is about how to do it. It's about thinking outside the box, thinking about networks, and lo and behold, the commission was created, and the commission was made up of 5 commissioners, 3 of the majority party, and that was the Democratic Party, and 2 from minority party. And LBJ, President Johnson, would be the one appointing those commissioners. Well, one of those commissioners was Elmer C. Jackson, not Elmer, it was Samuel C. Jackson. And Samuel Jackson was an attorney from Topeka, Kansas. He was from my law school, Washburn School of Law in Topeka. He was an attorney with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Sam was a real civil rights activist in his mid-30s. And he was a Republican. So he was nominated by President Johnson for one of the 2 Republican seats on the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Well, I knew Sam. I knew of his background. He was a personal friend. So I called him one day. I took that risk, made that phone call. Long distance calls were expensive. And as soon as Sam answered the phone, he said, Delano, I was waiting to hear from you. I knew you would call. I said, really? He said, yes. You heard that I was appointed as a commissioner of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. You've been living in Washington for a couple of years. You want to know what I can do for you? I said, absolutely right, Sam. And so the moral of that story is think outside the box. Think about your network. Sam was a commissioner at EEOC. And one of the things that Sam said, look, let me tell you what I'd like for you to do. I'd like for you to find me information about what's going on in Washington, about housing and schools and so on. And as a return, he said, what I'm going to do is create a task force and from the Department of Justice of lawyers who can come to the commission and help us get organized. So Sam Jackson appointed me, along with two other lawyers from the Department of Justice, to go over to EEOC and to begin to set up the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And this is the commission today that's set up and deals with employment discrimination. It deals with affirmative action. It deals with diversity and inclusion issues. It's very, very relevant today. And I got there as a lawyer at EEOC because of the network and the friendship and the mentorship of a lawyer from my law school named Samuel C. Jackson. Next time we talk, I'll tell you about once I got to EEOC and figured I wanted to get a promotion, how do I do it? And how can I get promoted? And I know many of you may be in that same position, and we could talk about that the next time we talk. This is Delano Lewis again. Until next time, I'll talk to you later. Godspeed.